Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you're doing okay. Going to read through the full article here. There's a link in the description. I'm going to give a trigger warning, quite a severe trigger warning. This is a horrific case. It involves the murder of a 5-month-old baby boy, Damon, at the hands of his scumbag father. The scumbag father being Caleb Scott, 26 years of age. This absolute fucking evil piece of shit right here. There's another picture of him. He's been found guilty of murder of Damon. He now faces either the death penalty or life in prison. So sentencing is coming up soon. We'll double check that when we read through the details. Here's a picture of the mother. This article doesn't give us too much details in regards to the mother's involvement, other than to say that she was at work when the father called police in regards to Damon's injuries that led to his death. She has been charged with the neglect of a child causing great bodily harm, failure to report child abuse, and neglect and culpable negligence. But those are charges. She hasn't faced trial yet. Her hearing is set for May the 3rd. So my take on it is she's basically being charged with being an enabler, and that's a word that I seem to be using quite a bit going through these articles. An enabler of the worst possible kind, turning a blind eye to the physical and ongoing torture of their own fucking child, a fucking 5-month-old. It's just incredibly insane and evil. But thankfully, the father has gone through a trial. He has been found guilty. So it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to get the death penalty, yes please, or life in prison. And I know a lot of you prefer life in prison. It gives the opportunity for more suffering of the individual. So personally, I have a favour for the death penalty. I just feel that scum like this just should be gotten rid of. If it were up to me, unfortunately it isn't, but if it were, then 2 to the back of the head, taken out to the back, dumped in a ditch, pour some concrete over, done. That's how I would handle it. I would not allow for appeals and extensive delays and all of this kind of thing at the cost of the taxpayers. I would just get it over and done with. You have a trial for a reason. Investigators have all kinds of evidence nowadays. Can mistakes happen? Yeah, sure. But by and large, I think your judicial system is capable of doing the right thing. Having said that, I can think of some examples when some people have been wrongly incarcerated, in my opinion. But anyhow, a cruel father who dropped, slapped, struck, and slammed his 5-month-old son so hard that the baby died of multiple blunt force trauma injuries has been found guilty of murder. Caleb Scott, this evil, pardon my French, motherfucking piece of shit, C word, that deserves a painful existence. He has been found guilty of murder, and he could face the death penalty after he murdered his baby son, Damon, at his house in Ormond Beach. I believe it's Ormond Beach, Florida, on June the 11th, 2019. The infant... Okay, sorry, I should mention that we are going to be going through some of the details concerning the beatings of Damon, the 5-month-old, and the injuries sustained. So I'm going to put in a trigger warning at this point. But details concerning the injuries pretty much go through the remainder of the article, pretty much. The infant endured unimaginable suffering for the 5 months he was alive at the hands of this piece of shit's Caleb Scott. With a cigarette burn found on Damon's ear and wounds to his face and mouth. Caleb Scott, this scumbag father, murdered his 5-month-old son, who weighed just 12 pounds at the time. He murdered his 5-month-old son in 2019 after he struggled to stop Damon from crying. When he couldn't get the baby to stop, Caleb Scott, the scumbag father, dropped, slapped, struck, and slammed the baby. £12. I'm not a parent. I'm not too qualified in this kind of thing, but £12, isn't that ridiculously small for a 5-month-old? The father called 911 to his home after he said his son was struggling to breathe, but when medics arrived, they found the 5-month-old unresponsive and dehydrated. Medics rushed the baby to Halifax Hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly afterwards. Following a 3-day trial and after 5 hours of deliberation, a jury on Wednesday found this piece of shit evil scumbag Caleb Scott guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and neglect of a child causing great bodily harm. The sentencing phase of the trial will begin on Monday, when the jurors will determine whether this piece of shit, who did not testify in his trial, whether he will be put to death or spend the rest of his life in prison. Here's a quote from the state attorney. Baby Damon suffered through 5 months of hell and ultimately died at the hands of his father. What he suffered is unimaginable. How could a father be so selfish and cruel? We will remain dedicated to protecting the most vulnerable and precious members of our community as we prepare for the sentencing phase of the trial. Damon's mother, this woman, Stephanie Holly, 36 years of age, who was at work when the scumbag father called the police, she has been charged with the neglect of a child causing great bodily harm, failure to report child abuse and neglect, and culpable negligence. A hearing is set for that piece of shit on May the 3rd. Again, I'm repeating myself. She's an enabler. She turned a blind eye. She was with a violent man who was the father of her child and a murderer of their child. She didn't do anything. She didn't do anything. Or whatever she did, it wasn't enough. It wasn't effective. You know, if it didn't do enough, then in effect, she didn't do anything. She's an enabler. So those charges, I hope, have a long, lengthy jail sentence attached to them. I don't know if they do or not. But to me, you know, again, I keep saying the same thing on all of these videos that I keep making. It's the enabling. Well, part of it is the enabling. It has to stop. Obviously, it has to stop in these severe situations, but enabling in general, even in less severe situations, we've just got to put a stop to it as society. If you are aware that someone is enabling another person's bad behavior, if it's clear that that is what is happening, that the bad behavior is clear for everybody to see, and yet someone or some people turn a blind eye to it time and time again, that behavior, that enabling behavior, needs to be called out by other people in society. If we don't do that, what happens? Bad behavior continues. Bad behavior escalates. In this situation, seemingly, the mother has enabled the scumbag father to mistreat and be physically abusive, physically torturous to their son, their infant son. She did nothing, or whatever she did, it certainly was nowhere near being enough. What could she have done? Well, she could have reported him to police, you know. If she had seen a cigarette burn on her baby's ear, I think I'm right in mentioning that, then if she had seen that, yeah, cigarette burn on his ear, wounds to his face and mouth, what should she do? Call the fucking police, you dozy bitch. Call the fucking police. Get out of the relationship. Run away. Take your child with you. Run. But where will I go? Anywhere, you fucking moron. You know, the guy's a violent murderer. You have a child that you need to protect. Run, go wherever you fucking can. So the mother is facing those charges: neglect of a child causing great bodily harm, failure to report child abuse, and neglect and culpable negligence. As a result of the abuse Damon endured, his autopsy found that he had suffered a subdural hematoma, bleeding on the brain often caused by a severe head injury. The scumbag father told police that he had beaten his child, he admitted to it, to stop the child from crying. The assistant state attorney told the jury that the scumbag father picked up the 5-month-old baby Damon by his throat before throwing him to the ground. The state's attorney, or the assistant state's attorney, told the jury that the scumbag father had described, so he had admitted to, he had described hitting the 5-month-old baby boy, his own son, Damon, hitting him to knock his teeth down his throat. He admitted to holding his child, picking up his child from the throat and throwing his body down, and also he admitted to hitting, punching his 5-month-old baby boy son, Damon, to knock his teeth down his throat. A doctor said the baby had lost tissue from his nose and his lips. Okay, so that's pretty much the full article. The article wraps up by telling us that in the sentencing phase, the jury must give a unanimous recommendation for death, for the death penalty to be an option. If they don't, the judge must sentence this scumbag father to mandatory life in prison with no parole. So that's the only blessing here, that he has been convicted. So this is a foregone conclusion that he will either get the death penalty or life in prison with no parole. I'm happy with the death penalty. A lot of you guys prefer life in prison with no parole. So look, there's a blessing. But other than that, what a fucking awful situation. What a fucking sick C word. See you next Tuesday. Awful, horrific piece of shit. There's the mother. She turned a blind eye to it. Not a problem, husband or father of my child. Not a problem. If you want to beat up our 5-year-old son, yeah, you go ahead. What the fuck did she do? Nothing. She deserves more than these charges in my mind. Unless this was a one-off incident. The article, to be fair, doesn't really clarify if Damon suffered ongoing abuse. I think it does. I mean, certainly this was an horrific hail of physical abuse that was thrown upon this 5-month-old that led to his death. I would assume that the boy suffered physical abuse throughout his short life, I would assume. And I would assume that the mother had some inkling of knowledge about that. Not even an inkling, scratch that, not an inkling. She would have knowledge. She would be able to see the cuts, the bruises, the harm, the behaviour. So I'm not happy about the light charges she's facing. But, let's hope that trial goes ahead. I'm going to wrap things up here. Normally I'd say condolences to the family. It's not really appropriate in this case. If you do like this type of content, please do give me some encouragement. And I am getting a lot of encouragement. I really, really appreciate it. It's great. I'm going to carry on doing this. I'm making multiple videos every single day in regards to these topics, which are published today, perhaps yesterday, but certainly very recently. I'm hoping to get in the habit of doing live streams. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'd like to welcome people to come up on panel and things like that, and we can just see how things go. If so we'll see if that does or does not develop, but hopefully it does. So I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you very much for listening. Take care. Get out of relationships with these scumbags. Don't be an enabler. And maybe you are an enabler. None of us are perfect. I'm not trying to preach overly. But if you are enabling somebody that is doing significant harm to another, not necessarily physical, do something about it, please. Do something about it, please. At the very, very least, recognize it and show your concern for the person at the other end of the abuse. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Take care, stay safe, be kind, get out of relationships with these scumbags, and I thank you for your time.